with India CEO India Birdsong, Senator Sandra Williams, and Senator Nikki Antonio. We're waiting for the meeting to begin. And we're looking forward to this conversation regarding our public transportation. Today is the 16th of March, 2021. And I'm so glad that you could be here today. It's scheduled to begin at 6. It has not begun yet. I have been on here for some time now, and I'm waiting. I am Facebook Live. It's 6:02. The meeting was to begin at 6 o'clock. Hopefully all is well. Once again, we're live here today, waiting for the meeting to begin, this town hall meeting to begin with CEO India Birdsong from the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, Senator Sandra Williams, and Senator Nikki Antonio. And I've been on here for a moment. They said it was to begin at 6 p.m. I am zooming in, and I still have not received one person yet. So prayerfully, they are en route to begin the process.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. You entered 976976115.
This wants to act retarded, I guess. It says, please wait, the Reverend hour will begin soon. And I've been on here for some time now, and it still has not begun.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You have not entered.
I'm the state senator for the 21st Senate District, and I want to thank you for joining me tonight for the Ohio Transportation Budget Update, which is currently in the Ohio Senate Transportation Committee. I am a member of that committee, along
Enter
with
your participant.
Senator Nikki Antonio, who represents the 23rd Senate District in Ohio, which is Lakewood, the city of Cleveland, and some other areas in Cuyahoga County. I also have with me Jessica Wallace. Jessica Wallace is a RTA rider, and she's going to share with us some of her experiences with RTA and how the budget that we are working on right now will impact her. We have a very special guest as well as Jessica, because she's a very special guest. We have the CEO of the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, India Birdsong. She's going to be joining us hopefully in a few minutes. She's having a little bit of technical difficulty. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I wanted to first give you guys an update on what we are working on. Now, I told you about the transportation budget, but I wanted to also tell you what goes into that transportation budget. We fund the highway patrol. We fund the funds for infrastructure for highway construction. So let's start with that. ODOT's budget is a $5.89 billion budget over the biennium. And in that budget, we fund construction projects for our highways, bridges, and local infrastructure. And our local regional department that deals with that is NOACA. So let me break down to you how we fund those projects. 47.7% of the dollars that we provide in the transportation budget for highway construction comes from the federal government. 44.6% of those dollars come from the state government. 2.7% of those dollars come from the local government, and 2.7% comes from state and local bonds. Now, again, I said that makes up $5.89 billion over the biennium. So it's a lot of money that we will be appropriating. This budget has to be passed by the Constitution by March 31st of this year. So we are at a crunch time right now, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. Now, let's break down where some of the state money comes from. When you go to the gas station and you buy a gallon of gas, you are helping to fund the Ohio transportation budget. That budget and that part is the highway construction. So every time you are riding on the freeway or riding on our streets in the Northeast Ohio area, your dollars are paying for it every time you go to the gas station. So let me give you a breakdown. When you go to the gas station, you pay a tax of 0.38%. 38.5 cents comes charged when you go to the gas station every time you get a gallon of gas. If you are buying compressed natural gas, you are paying 20 cents extra as a tax when you get a gas of gasoline. And if you're buying diesel, you pay 47 cents. So you go to the gas station, you're not just paying to receive the gas, you're paying to send money back to the state legislature so that we can fund the transportation infrastructure bill, which I just discussed. You also have, beyond the state taxes, you have a federal tax of 18.4 cents. So you're paying 38.5 cents to the state government. If you have regular gas, you're paying 20 cents if you're getting CNG. You're paying 47 cents if you are buying diesel. And the federal government on top of that has you paying 18.40 cents. So that is our infrastructure budget. Of those dollars that I just outlined for you, 55% of all those dollars stay with ODOT, the Ohio Department of Transportation. 45% of those dollars go back to local governments, and in our case, it's NOACA, and they use that money for whatever projects they deem necessary. So that is our infrastructure budget. But today we are here because we wanted to focus on public transit, and that's been the hot topic for a lot of people over the years. Now, I wanted to give you the funding sources, and I know this might be going a little deep for people, but I think it's important for you to know where all these dollars come from. So for our transportation budget, which is a total of $196.67 million. That is how much the state has right now for transportation. $196 million over the next 2 years. That money comes from federal pass-through funds from the federal government. So the federal government is giving us $40.2 million every fiscal year. So that's fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23 from the federal government. The second earmark comes from the federal government, the federal highway flex dollars. And that is a total of $33 million. And that can be used for capital projects for ODOT. And then finally, it is right now $23.15 million from the state of Ohio. And that's where a lot of the controversy is coming in right now. Let's talk about the as-introduced version of the budget. When the governor introduced his budget, he allocated $7 million for the entire year for public transit from the state of Ohio. Now, most experts, most people who deal with this, the issue of transportation, believe that that is not sufficient to address the transportation needs of the residents of the state of Ohio. To put it in perspective, 2 years ago when we passed the transportation budget, we allocated $70 million per year for public transit. So we went from $70 million a year for public transit for the entire state, not just for one region, but for the entire state, to $7 million for the entire state per year. So that's what we want to talk about today, and talk about what the impact of a 90% cut in state funding for public transit will mean to riders here in the state of Ohio. I do have some good news though. The House of Representatives, when they passed their budget last week, they were able to increase the state's allocation from $7 million to $23.15 million per year. It is a good increase, but it's not the amount of money we need to service all of the needs from the riders within our community. So I wanted to start there. I also want to talk to the director, the CEO of the Greater Cleveland RTA to talk about track funding. The Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority was in our transportation committee last week, and they talked about transportation fund, track funding. Track funding is used to expand some of our current roads and other things. RTA is currently using track funding to improve the rails for our rapid transit, our rapid system in Cleveland. We're the only area in the state of Ohio that actually has a rapid. And so right now, RTA is replacing the tracks that the rapid goes on, but they don't have enough funding for the actual cars. And the cars and the railing is out of date. And so Senator Antonio I and others from Northeast Ohio will be asking for an amendment to allow the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority to apply for track funding to buy new buses, not buses, but rail cars for the Greater Cleveland RTA. And I do see now Jose Feliciano coming on. So, Jose, are you here to take the place of our CEO? Okay. India's actually joining now, so if we can just hold a minute, we will be right there. Nikki, would you like to add anything in, or Senator Antonio, before the CEO gets here?
No, I just want to say that was a wonderful summary of our budget, and just what I look forward to talking a little bit about the process after we hear from Director Birdsong from RTA. But it's a lot of money for sure, and I thought that my favorite part of what you've mentioned so far is just to let people know that tax at the gas pump is actually paying for us to be able to repair and keep safe our roads and bridges. I think that's really important, and that's great. But one of the areas that has been incredibly important, but not always a priority in Ohio in terms of the way we fund it, is public transportation. And Senator Williams and I have been pushing for a long time to increase those dollars for sure. I think we have an opportunity with this budget to be able to do that.
I also want to let you know, Senator Antonio, you brought up something that I didn't mention. The federal flex dollars, as I said, goes for the infrastructure on our highways and bridges, our streets, in our communities. But one of the requests that the NOACA agency and others have been asking for.
Welcome to Zoom.
Allow them
Enter your meeting
to
ID
use
followed by
federal flex
pound.
dollars to go to RTA to help with some of the needed dollars they need for operating or infrastructure. Secondly, we are proposing, I actually proposed this in a bill last General Assembly, and we are proposing it again this year, to change the funding structure so that
Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise,
from this budget based on vehicle miles traveled. We all know that in some of our bigger urban communities, we have a lot of people who are
please enter the meeting passcode followed by pound.
to go to work or to go shopping or whatever the case may be. And
You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter the meeting passcode followed by pound.
urban areas have more cars on their roads, and so the experts believe that we should be returning the money to the local communities based on how many.
You have joined the meeting as an attendee and will be muted throughout the meeting.
If more cars are on our roads, then we're going to have more infrastructure or more repairs that need to be made. So why don't we get more dollars back from the state budget, because we're handling more volume than most people are. So I see our CEO is joining us now, so I wanted to really take a moment and just give you a little bit about her background before her entry is complete. India Birdsong served as the CEO and General Manager of the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. She joined RTA in September of 2019 and brings nearly 15 years of experience working in positions of increasing responsibility in the public transit industry. She began her career in 2006 when she joined the Central Region for the Chicago Transit Authority, where she served in planning, operations, and finally as Senior Manager of Bus Supervision and Instruction. She was appointed in 2016 as the Chief Operating Officer of WeGo Public Transit in Nashville, where she served until she came to the Cleveland area. We are lucky to have Ms. Birdsong here joining us to take
I'm glad to see
our
them
regional
finally
transit
doing this.
system to the next
I've
level.
been participating in
We know for a fact
RTA
that she's
board
been doing a
meetings
great
and
job
committee
so far,
meetings
and
for
I
over
cannot wait
19
to hear
years.
what she's
And
going
I'm
to be
glad to
doing
see
next.
some people finally
And
joining
as
me
I
to
said
help
that,
improve our
we had
transportation
another
system.
technical difficulty.
And
So
I just
Nikki,
want to
why don't you tell us a little bit about what's at stake in this budget and what the process
go to
is going to
network
be?
areas as
As
well,
I said earlier, Nikki Antonio
including
serves as the
Indigo
ranking
and other
Democrat
places.
on the committee. She's been serving on Transportation Committee as well as the whole Finance Committee for years now. And
Prayerfully, we'll
why
take
don't
the
you take
time
it
to
away
have a
from there,
discussion
Nikki?
with me as
Okay,
well, since I've
okay,
been
and
asking
I'll
for
keep an
one.
eye out for Director Birdsong to come back. So basically where we're at right now is we've been hearing folks come and testify. We're going to continue to hear that this next week. And we have already offered some amendments. As Senator Williams pointed out, one of the things that when we first got this budget from the administration, they had taken the funding for public transit from 70 million last General Assembly down to 7 million when the budget was introduced by the administration. Well, our friends in the House agreed with those of us in the Senate, said that it's not enough money to really support public transportation. Public transit needs to be a priority in the state of Ohio. And so the House amended the budget, and as Senator Williams said, put $23 million per year back in. We're hoping to increase and to really go back to the 70 million that was there in the last budget, the last time we went through, because we know how much public transportation is needed, both in rural and urban areas. I mean, all over the state. This is an important issue for folks. So that's at the heart, I think, of this budget. We also want to make sure that we can fix our roads and bridges. And in Cuyahoga County, as Senator Williams pointed out, we are going to be very much working across the aisle to try to get agreement to find some of that funding to be able to replace the track for the rapid line, but also those cars, which are in very much need of replacement as time goes on, and they're incredibly expensive. But did you know that really the rapid line is the most important and the only rail line that we have, a passenger rail line that's a commuter rail in the state of Ohio. It's the only one. So it's kind of unique and very cool that we can offer this for folks. There were some other things in the budget about distracted driving, trying to get the folks who have electric vehicles to pay a little bit towards, because think about it, they're not paying a gas tax, right? To keep our roads and bridges maintained. So we're working on that and trying to figure out how to also edit those kinds of things and add a little bit to it so they can actually participate in supporting the roads and bridges funding, but at a level that makes sense for them, because we're also trying to encourage people. We want to see people buying electric vehicles because they're good for the environment. It's probably the way we're going to go in the future. It looks like Ms. Birdsong is back on, so I'm going to stop there, Senator, and see if we can't bring her into the conversation.
Definitely. And before we do that, what I want to make sure I offer is an opportunity for everyone in the state of Ohio, in our region, to submit written testimony, to come down to the city,
I don't know who that person is they chose to promote as a writer, but Senator Williams and Senator Antonio refused to even have a conversation with me or talk to me, period, return a call, etc. But I am so glad that they are finally getting involved. And I pray that since Senator Williams does represent the East Side, she will begin to address our concerns for the East Side and not do an overall general prognosis of these matters, but emphasize the need of the East Side concerns. She won't have a discussion with me, so maybe she'll have one with you all.
Information on how to submit your testimony, but it's going to be moving really quickly. So please send testimony down. So with that being said, CEO Birdsong, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for having me. I apologize for the glitch in the technology, but I am
Senator
on
Antonio will have a
audio, so
discussion
I
with me
can hear
regarding
everyone
any
clearly. I just can't see you.
So I'd like to know.
Well, you know what? That's okay. We saw you for a minute, and we saw your beautiful face, and we were happy that you did that way for a minute. I really do appreciate you being here, because this is a very important subject for so many people within our region, and I know that you deal with this every
I realize
day,
re-election time
in
is
and
coming
out,
up,
and I
so
guess the
that's why
first
these
question I would have
discussions
for
are
you
beginning,
is,
but I'm just glad they're
thank you
beginning.
for sending one of your executives down last week to testify. His testimony was awesome, and he was able to answer the question very well. So thank you for that.
That was Mike Schiffer.
Yeah. My apologies. I'm having your name in front of me. So, Mr. Schiffer, thank you for that. The first question I have for you is, we talked about going from $70 million a year in the last transportation budget to $7 million a year. We know that the House of Representatives were able to get those numbers up to $23 million, but we're still short. That was a 90% cut that the governor offered in his as introduced version of the bill. So please tell me, if we do provide a 90% cut to state funding for public transportation, what would that look like for RTA? How would that impact you?
Absolutely. So, Senator, first, I appreciate you for inviting us today, and I absolutely will pass along your sentiments to Mr. Schiffer. He actually is dialed in as well. So that was our Deputy General Manager for Engineering and Development. So we appreciate that. To answer your question, or to address your question regarding the budget cut proposal, it really is detrimental to us as an overall agency, and I say really the state and the industry, really. It's a blow to our planning process. So if you're looking at $70 million and all of that is brought down,
when the women will have discussions with me instead of avoiding me
with planning
and
for
excluding
state of
me,
good repair projects, for
but
capital
working with
projects
me.
and expenditures, and really making the system more customer friendly, as well as making sure that folks feel comfortable and safe on our system.
especially because in Cleveland, we really have some of the oldest infrastructure in the state, and I dare say the country, for some of our equipment, such as the rail car. We definitely are looking at how to be more innovative in our approach as far as how to kind of compete with the car and how to compete with third-party vendors in a good way, in a positive way. When I say competition, such as Lyft and Uber and all of those kind of rideshare programs that were coming out pre-COVID, we really want to think about how we can look more attractive to our potential ridership and the community members that rely on us every day. So when we're looking at a 90% cut, it really takes us backwards, to be quite honest with you, as far as being able to procure good stations, to be able to work on locations that are transit-oriented development sites, our ability to really provide that quality service that I think the Cleveland community is looking for, and really the state is looking for as well. As the largest entity in Ohio for public transit, we do typically get the lion's share of that funding. So when you actually look at that kind of cut, there's no way that we can make up for that gap easily or readily when we're thinking about processing these projects that really are still investment in our communities, especially communities of color and communities that are low to mid-income that depend on these services. So it definitely was a blow to us, and I think that's why we're rallying so hard and so emphatically to make sure people understand that this is a necessary component to our budget structure. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Listen, when we first heard about the budget, I had a conversation with a majority leadership here and the governor's office, and their rationale for cutting the funding was that you all got all of the regional transit authorities across the state received over $700 or almost $700 million in COVID-19 funding. Can you share with the listeners what you actually did with that money and what it could be used for?
Sure, I think that's a fair question, and we've actually been asked it quite a bit over the last few weeks. We at RTA received in the first round of funding and stimulus kind of package for COVID response. We got about $112 million in that first round of CARES Act funding. So if you're looking at $112 million, that sounds like a huge number, and it's a very sizable amount. However, we were specifically instructed, as were a lot of different agencies across the country, to utilize that money for reimbursement for operational activities in response to COVID. So what we did was we used that funding to make sure that we didn't have any layoffs. We haven't had any major cuts to service. In fact, we operated at our worst, right, at 85% of pre-COVID levels. We're at 93% now. And we also utilized that money to be able to invest in disinfecting technologies. We've invested in a lot of technologies that are utilized on aircraft as well as hospitals. So we make sure that we can keep the service running and the buses and the trains on the street. Like I mentioned, we have not had any major layoffs, no major cuts, no furloughs. And then we also are using it to stabilize ourselves over the next foreseeable year or two operationally, because we have seen a reduction of about 50% in ridership. Folks are staying at home. They're coming on our service when it's essential only. And we appreciate that. It's allowed us to actually have really low numbers as far as the reported cases in RTA, as far as the RTA family goes. We actually stayed in the 30s for reported cases out of a staff of 2,300 well into October of last year through the pandemic. We're somewhere closer to around 190 now because, of course, we've had about a year of COVID and things have spiked around the holidays. But that money is not applicable to capital projects. So we still have a backlog of about $514 million worth of projects that need to be addressed. And it has been recommended that we look at flex funds and also look at other grant opportunities that may be out there in order to help us through that. But the CARES Act funding is specifically for operational needs in response to COVID, and we absolutely have drawn down on all of those dollars. And without that, we would be in a dire situation, but it in no way replaces the state funding for capital.
That's great. Well, I will say this, the House did a pretty good job at improving the governor's budget. When the budget was introduced, the governor's office was not in favor of allowing the regional transit authorities to use flex funding. But we did find out that they earmarked $33 million each fiscal year for entities like yours to use those flex dollars. And it's an 80-20 match, so you get 80% from the flex funds and 20% match from the local authorities. How will that help you in what you're trying to achieve?
I think it will help. It will help get us closer to our goal. But again, we have such a large gap between where we are and where we need to be on the capital side that we really are looking at how the state can provide a almost guaranteed, right, the commitment to preserving public transit in the greater Cleveland area and really throughout Ohio. The problem that we run into is that when we don't have a dedicated funding source, there's been a lot of conversations about referendums and tax and how we're going to be able to get to that point. It's very difficult to be able to plan out a project that spans more than a year. And if you look at the average, I'll just give you an example. If you look at the average time frame on purchasing a transit vehicle, and I'm talking about like a 40-footer, plus transit vehicle, you usually are looking at a minimum of 18 months. And I'm talking about from the procurement time that you place the order to when it's actually on the road. So essentially almost none of our procurement takes less than a year. So if you're going to look at the time frame it takes to talk about a budget cycle, we really have to have budgets that are guaranteed or at least have a dedicated placeholder of more than a year, probably preferably 2 to 5 years, in order for us to actually plan accordingly. Otherwise, we really are functioning hand to mouth, which is a huge disservice to our customers and also to our ability to be able to be more innovative in our purchasing. And I want to jump in here right now. I really appreciate that you brought up that dedicated line. It's something we've been trying. Those of us in our Democratic caucus have been trying to get a dedicated line for public transportation for many years, and we've looked at that. Somebody in the chat asked a question about, is it helpful to look at states around us that actually really invest is much higher level in their public transit, and can we use that as a rationale for Ohio spending more money? We've been bringing it up and trying to make that comparison, but unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be something that is accepted as a reason why Ohio spends at such a low level. India, do you want to address that? Because I know that issue comes up so much. Absolutely. I would love to address that. First, I think you are absolutely correct in your analysis. We've got to be able to look outside of ourselves to be able to think about good and effective mechanisms to fund public transit. I am not a native Clevelander. However, I